There are many different ways to profit from property and in essence to make money from property. Yet many people tend to focus on one strategy, which is basic vanilla buy-to-let, where you're purchasing a regular family house, renting it to a family, maybe putting a 25% deposit down, borrowing 75% from the bank, the way of a buy-to-let mortgage. Now, there's nothing wrong with that particular strategy, but there's so many other ways to make money from property. However, the thing that many people tend to make a mistake on is that it doesn't really match with the outcome they're trying to achieve. Ultimately, there's three main ways to make money from property, and what I want to do in this video, break down what they are, how they work, and why they're important. If you're watching my videos for the first time, my name is Saj Hussain, and on this channel I share with you my 15+ years of property investing experience to ultimately help you get further faster in your own property investing business. When it comes to making money from property, as I said earlier, there's so many different ways to make money. And often people get involved in property because really what they want to do is to be able to build up some extra income, maybe a passive income, so they don't have to do the work that they may be currently doing, and ultimately get freedom and choice in terms of what they do with their life and how they spend their time. That's really the desire for many people. It's a stepping stone. Property is the tool or the vehicle they're using in order to create income to be able to do something else with their lives. There's very few people that are actually passionate about the buildings, the property themselves. There are some crazy people like me, but mostly it's really a stepping stone in order to be able to do something else. The thing to remember about property investing, it isn't always necessarily passive. So what that means is often you're doing some work, you're exchanging time for money, you're committing to doing certain things on a daily, weekly basis in order for that business to work, as opposed to you sitting on the beach, sipping your pina coladas or non-alcoholic ones in my case, but enjoying life and not really doing anything and the money's coming to the account. Generally speaking, when we talk about investing in property, the more involved you are, the more money you make. The less involved you are, generally the less your profit is. Generally speaking, although there's some different strategies you can use to change that, but that tends to be the general setup. So for instance, if you purchase that regular investment property, that buy-to-let property for £100,000, you put down £25,000 of deposit, you borrow £75,000 from the bank, you rent it to a family, the family are then paying you £700 or £800 a month rent for that property, there's probably not a huge amount of involvement that you will have on a day-to-day basis. Maybe just overseeing things that the managing agent is doing to make sure the rent's collected, or overseeing any void or maintenance matters that may arise. But generally speaking, it's fairly hands-off and it's fairly passive. But your returns are probably also lower compared to, say, for example, you take a property on and you set that up to operate it as service accommodation, or for example the Airbnb model, which is much more hands-on. You've got people coming and going on almost on a daily basis, sometimes a little bit like running a hotel, but your profit margin in comparison to the buy-to-let will go through the roof. It's like chalk and cheese. They're completely different, but the second one means you're much more committed, much more involved. Now, it doesn't mean that one is right and the other one is wrong. The important thing is that you understand your objective of why you're getting involved in property, what is it you're trying to achieve, and how this is going to help you. So earlier I mentioned there's three core ways to make money from property, and they break down as follows. You're either going to create cash flow, so that means you're generating a monthly income, a monthly profit from that property, or you may be cashing out of a deal. And when we talk about cashing out, this is, for example, if you're renovating and flipping a property on, you're selling it on for a property, you're walking away with a chunk of cash. And when we talk about chunk of cash, that's actually a technical term. I'm only kidding. So you're either walking away with a chunk of cash, or your third method is you're building equity. Equity is money that's locked into the property. That's your profit, as it were, but it's paper profit. You can't really access it very easily, very readily. You certainly can't go to Tesco's and do your shopping with it because it's locked into that particular property. So before you get started in property, it's important to think about what is it that you ultimately want to try and achieve. So for example, if you're getting involved in property because you want to build a pension up for the long term, you don't necessarily need that money today, but you want to make your future life easier, then it may be that you're using more of an equity strategy where you're building up equity so that in the future that will grow, be worth significantly more. And many of us believe that property values will go up over time, hence why we're involved in property today, or why we're interested in getting involved. So that could be, for example, a long-term pension strategy, which is building that equity. Alternatively, it may be that you want cash flow. You want to give up the day job. You want to build up an alternative income fairly quickly. You don't mind getting your hands dirty, rolling up your sleeves and being active in that particular strategy because you're starting to build up an income, and that income may be similar to what you're already earning, or it could be significantly more than you're already earning in your current day job. And there, for example, you might be setting up a property run as a HMO where you've got multiple tenants. in a single property paying you rent, so you've got much more income coming in from that same building. Or it may even be, as we mentioned earlier on, running a service accommodation, a short stay business, where really what you're doing is almost selling the property per night as a nightly stay, a little bit like how a hotel would. And again, you're increasing the income that you can create from that particular property. Now, the third option is it may be that you want to create chunks of cash. So it may be that you start with a lump sum of cash, maybe let's say you've got a couple of $100,000 and you want to grow that pot of cash to make it much more. It may be that you want to use that money for something else. It may be you want to then go and invest in a different form of strategy within property. You just want to grow the portfolio first. For whatever reason, it may be those chunks of cash are much more important. And there you'll be looking for properties that maybe you can purchase, add value to, and sell on, or that there's some kind of discount maybe on the initial purchase that you're doing, so that you're building some cash straight away and you're exiting or you're selling that particular property either after adding value or even as it is to take that cash out. When you understand that there's three core ways of making money from property, it's much easier then to formulate a strategy that's going to be in line with the profit outcome that you're trying to create. As I mentioned earlier, it might be long-term income you're trying to create. It may be something you need today, it's cash flow. It may be the chunks of cash that you're trying to create, but then the strategy you're looking at is going to fit in line. Too often I will meet people that are interested in property, they want to make money from property, they see somebody using a certain strategy, they think that's the one for them, that's what they want to do, without necessarily understanding, is that going to fit in with what they're ultimately trying to do and what they're trying to achieve from property. Now, with some strategies, what we'll find that they actually spill over a little bit into a multitude of different types of methods. So for example, there might be primarily a cash flow element to that strategy. There may be a little bit of equity in it. There could even be a bit of cash out as well. But most of the time, most strategies, generally speaking, will fit into one of these three categories. So for example, if you're doing, say, like a BRR type strategy where you purchase a property, you renovate it, you then rent it out and refinance it, what you're doing there on a property like that is you're adding some value, you're taking your cash out, and effectively, in my mind, that's a long-term equity strategy. It's not going to give you a lot of cash flow each and every month, but what you've done is taken most of your cash out to be able to recycle and buy again. But what you're ultimately doing is building equity for the longer term. Now, if you're making, say, £100, £200 a month cash flow profit from there, I wouldn't really consider that as a cash flow strategy, because a little bit of a voids or maintenance on the property, let's say you have to change a boiler during that year, most of that profit is going to get wiped out that you create as a buy to let, because it's ultimately designed about building long-term equity rather than cash flow. So when we're looking at the strategy, we really want to drill down and understand the numbers and say, is this going to get me closer to my long-term objective about what it is I'm trying to achieve from property? Hey, if you've enjoyed this content, really help me out if you click on my face over here to subscribe to the channel, because YouTube stats tell me most people that watch the videos don't actually subscribe to the channel, and I'd really appreciate that. It helps us out as well. There's no charge for this content, but it means that we can keep going, building more content for you. Then once you've done that, then make sure you click over here to watch this video next, where I talk about how to formulate the right strategy for you in a lot more detail. So I look forward to seeing you on this video next.